I never thought that signing such a simple paper would be the beginning of my eviction. It was early, still with the morning chill seeping through the doorframe. I was sitting on the porch rocker, staring at the garden where Robert had planted his favorite roses. 3 days had passed since we buried him. Just 3 days. And there was my daughter Allison, standing in the doorway with a manila envelope in her hand and a coldness in her eyes I had never seen before. "Dad left everything to me," she said without blinking. "The house, the accounts, everything. Mom, you need to leave." I just sat there. My hands trembled on my knees, my soul shattered, and my suitcase half-zipped behind me. The air suddenly felt heavy, like I no longer had the right to breathe the same oxygen as a daughter capable of saying such a thing. In the very house where I fed her first spoon of mashed apples, where I sang her to sleep when she had a fever, where I hand-stitched her quinceañera dress. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. I saw myself reflected in those empty eyes, and I knew that sweet little girl was long gone. "What's this?" I finally asked, nodding toward the envelope. She didn't hesitate for even a second. "The will. Robert signed it with the lawyer a year ago. What's written there is legal. There's nothing more to discuss." She said it just like that. No hesitation. As if I were an expired tenant, not her mother, not Robert's wife of 41 years. My mind couldn't keep up with my heart. And my heart, well, it was no longer there. It had crashed to the ground with those words. "You need to leave." Where is a widow supposed to go, 3 days after burying the love of her life? A motel? The street? Robert and I had spoken many times about our retirement, about the safety of this roof, about the garden that would keep me company when he could no longer be with me. How could he leave everything to Allison and never mention it to me? Allison stood there for a few more seconds, like she was waiting for me to stand up and go. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. "I'm sorry, Mom," she finally said, though her voice had not a hint of remorse. "This is what Dad wanted." Then she turned around, as if she had just closed a bank transaction. No tears. No goodbye. I was left alone. Me, the wife, the mother, the caretaker, Robert's lifelong partner. Alone, on the porch of a house that was no longer mine, with a half-zipped suitcase and a completely broken heart. But in that silence, something ignited. A low, steady warmth. Not anger. Not yet. It was something deeper. Like a seed. A suspicion. Something didn't add up. Robert wouldn't have done that. Not without telling me. Not without protecting me. That's how it all began. Not with shouting. Not with a fight. But with a woman who had nothing left, except one doubt. And a doubt, when nurtured, can grow into justice. That night, I lay on a creaky motel bed, staring at the stained ceiling tiles like they might offer answers. $55 a night. A place that smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. A far cry from the home I'd helped build for over 4 decades. Allison's words echoed in my head like a cruel lullaby. "You're useless now." That's what she saw when she looked at me. After everything I had given? All the birthday cakes, the school pickups, the long nights by her side when her heart was broken? Was that all reduced to useless? I kept repeating it to myself, not because I believed it, but because I couldn't believe she had said it. The more I turned the phrase over in my mind, the more hollow it sounded. As if she were trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to dismiss me. I had always known that Allison was sharp, calculating, even, but never cruel. Or maybe she always was, and I was too blind with love to see it. Isn't that the way with mothers? We see the best, even when it's hidden under layers of selfishness. But that night, as I sat there with nothing but a suitcase and a styrofoam cup of weak coffee, something else crept in. Doubt. Not in myself, but in the story she told me. Robert leaving everything to her? Without even mentioning it to me? No letter? No conversation? No warning? That didn't sound like my Robert. He wasn't perfect. Lord knows we had our fights, but he was steady. Responsible. The kind of man who wouldn't even change the brand of peanut butter without asking me first. And I remembered something small, but suddenly heavy. 2 weeks before his surgery, Robert had gone into the study and spent nearly an hour fiddling with the safe. He told me it was just organizing paperwork. But afterward, he seemed relieved. Like a man who had finally tied up a loose end. Why would a man, organizing paperwork, look so relieved? Back then, I didn't press him. I didn't think I needed to. But now, lying on that hard mattress, the memory lit up in my mind like a beacon. Maybe what Allison showed me wasn't the whole story. Maybe that envelope she waved in my face was one version of the truth, but not the final one. And if Robert did leave something behind, if there was even a chance that he tried to protect me before he died, then I owed it to both of us to find out. That's when the fog in my chest began to lift. Not entirely, but enough to let one thought in. Something doesn't feel right. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. Instead, it wandered, far from the motel, far from the betrayal, and landed on a morning from decades ago. It was 1984. Allison had just left her husband. She was 22, heartbroken, and back in her childhood home. I found her that morning curled up at the kitchen table, still in her old high school hoodie, her face blotchy from crying all night. I didn't ask questions. I just tied my apron and made her favorite pancakes, the ones with cinnamon and a little nutmeg, the way she liked since she was a little girl. I remember the way she watched me move around the kitchen, her eyes following every stir of the batter, every clink of the spatula. And when I set the plate in front of her, she didn't say thank you. She just broke down sobbing into her hands. I wrapped my arms around her, held her head to my chest, and said nothing. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than comfort. You're the only one I trust, she whispered between tears. The only one. That memory clung to me like warm sunlight. Back then, I was her anchor, her refuge. I was the one she turned to when the world disappointed her. Now she looked at me like I was an inconvenience, an obstacle to be cleared out of the way. I stared at the ceiling again and thought, how did we get here? Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Did I give too much? Did I not give enough? And yet, even through all that pain, I realized something. Love, real love, doesn't vanish. It doesn't vanish overnight, and it certainly doesn't vanish just because someone stops being grateful for it. But trust? Trust can be broken. Quietly, deliberately, like how you'd snap a pencil in two and then act like it was always meant to be that way. Maybe that was what hurt the most. Not that Allison had betrayed me, but that she had calculated it. Planned it, with cold, careful steps. Steps that probably started long before Robert's death. Long before that envelope showed up. And maybe the pancakes, the tears, the hugs, they were all just chapters in a book she closed when it stopped serving her. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye and sat up in bed. No use crying over memories. But that morning in 1984? That memory reminded me of who I was. I wasn't some discarded old woman. I was a mother, a wife, a woman who had carried her family on her back and never once asked for anything in return. And now? Now it was time to ask. Not for pity, for answers. The next morning, I walked into the public library like a woman on a mission. Not like someone who had just been thrown out of her home, not like a widow with nowhere to go. No, I walked in like someone who had a question that needed answering, and wouldn't rest until she found it. The probate records desk was quiet. A young man with glasses looked up from behind the counter and smiled politely. I'm looking for a copy of a will, I said. My husband's, Robert Wells. He passed away 3 days ago. He typed something on his computer, then nodded. It's here, filed electronically. Would you like a printout? I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. 5 minutes later, I was seated in a corner with the document spread out on the table in front of me. Page after page of legal language, formal and cold, like it was written in another lifetime. Then I saw it. His signature. At the bottom of page 2. My heart caught. Robert Wells. But something wasn't right. It was the shape of the R. Robert always made his R's with a little loop, almost like a cursive swirl. This one was sharp. Angular. Too perfect. And then the W, his W's always dipped lower on the left side. This one was evenly spaced. Mechanical. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out an old birthday card I kept in my wallet, the last one he gave me. To my Dulcie, it said, in his unmistakable handwriting. The looped R, the dip in the W. This signature in the will, it wasn't the same hand. I swallowed hard. Either Robert's signature had changed drastically in the last few months of his life, or someone had copied it. Or worse, faked it. I looked around the library, suddenly aware of how still everything was. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft rustle of a page turning somewhere behind me. I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding now, not with fear, but with clarity. This will might not be real. And if it wasn't real, then that envelope Allison held like a weapon wasn't the truth. It was a cover. Robert had been careful. He'd always been a man of plans and backup plans. If someone had manipulated this document, then he would have known. He would have left something else behind. He had to have. I stood up, folded the papers, and tucked them into my purse. I didn't know where the trail would lead, but I knew one thing. I wasn't walking away from this. Not quietly. That afternoon, I called Carol. Carol and I met back in the 80s at a church fundraiser, and even after all these years, she was still sharp as a tack, especially when it came to legal documents. She'd spent 20 years as an estate law paralegal before retiring to care for her mother. If anyone could help me make sense of what I saw, it was her. We met at a little coffee shop 2 blocks from the library. Quiet place. Good tea. I brought the will, along with the birthday card I'd used as comparison. Carol wore her usual cardigan and practical shoes, and gave me a long hug the moment she saw my face. "Oh Dulcie," she whispered. "I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry." I nodded, my throat tight. "Carol, I need you to look at something. Really look." We sat by the window, and I laid the documents in front of her. She adjusted her glasses and leaned in. First the will, then the card, then the will again. She didn't say anything at first, just squinted, tilted her head, and gave a little hum. "What?" I asked. "Do you see it?" Carol looked up at me with raised eyebrows. "Well, yes, I do." She pointed at the signature on the will. "This doesn't look like Robert's usual signature. Not the one I remember from when I notarized things for you too. And definitely not the one in this card." She tapped the birthday card. "This one, this is fluid, natural." His hand. "The other one? It looks traced. Or forged." My heart gave a heavy thud. I wasn't imagining it. "You think someone faked it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Carol didn't answer right away. "I'm not a handwriting expert," she said carefully. "But I've seen hundreds of signatures. And this one doesn't sit right." She looked at me then, with that wise, protective look only old friends can give. "Do you think Allison had something to do with this?" I looked out the window. The sun was low, casting golden light across the sidewalk. People walked by, living their normal little lives, unaware that mine had been turned inside out. "I don't want to believe it," I said. "But something doesn't add up. Robert wouldn't have done this to me. Not in silence. Not like this." Carol nodded slowly. "Then you need more than my opinion. You need a professional." I took a sip of my now cold tea. The bitterness didn't even register. I had come in with a hunch. I was leaving with a path. And once a woman like me finds a path, she walks it. No matter how long. A week later, I walked into the modest office of Mr. Arthur Leeds, a probate lawyer recommended by Carol. The building was old, tucked between a pharmacy and a laundromat, with faded paint on the door and a bell that jingled when you stepped inside. But I didn't care about appearances. I wasn't there for show, I was there for answers. Mr. Leeds was a thin, gray-haired man with a gentle voice and a gaze that didn't miss much. After I explained the situation, I handed him both the filed will and the birthday card with Robert's real signature. He didn't rush. He took his time reading every page, scanning every signature, jotting quiet notes on a yellow legal pad. Then he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Mrs. Wells," he said, "this filed will might be legitimate on paper, but there are inconsistencies. And frankly, it raises more questions than it answers." I swallowed hard. "Like what?" He tapped his pen on the will. "The witness signatures are from an accounting office in another county. Odd, considering your husband was recovering from surgery locally. And the signature style change? Significant." I felt a flicker of something deep in my gut. Hope, maybe. Or fear. "Do you think it's forged?" "I think it's suspicious," he replied carefully. "But the more important question is, was this the last will your husband wrote?" That stopped me. "What do you mean?" Mr. Leeds leaned forward. "It's not uncommon for people to draft more than one will over time, especially if they feel pressured or if circumstances change. Did your husband have a trust? A locked safe? A second will?" And then I remembered. 2 weeks before Robert's surgery, he had gone to the closet and opened our small home safe. He'd told me not to worry, just updating some documents. He even asked me to leave the room. I didn't think twice about it back then. Why would I? But now, it hit me like a bolt. There might be something in there. Something he left for me. I looked at Mr. Leeds, heart pounding. "We had a safe," I said. "A joint deposit box at the local bank. He put something in there right before the surgery." Mr. Leeds nodded slowly. "Then that's your next step." I stood up, purse in hand, feeling taller than I had in days. "I'm going to the bank," I said. "Today." And for the first time since Allison stood on my porch and told me to leave, I felt it. A sense of purpose. A thread of truth I could follow. And I intended to pull it, until the whole thing unraveled. I didn't sleep the night before. Too many what-ifs spinning through my mind. What if there was nothing in the box? What if it was all in my head? What if Robert really had changed everything and simply didn't tell me? But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Robert didn't keep secrets. Not from me. At least, not the kind that left someone homeless. By 9 a.m., I was standing at the local bank where Robert and I had kept our joint safe deposit box for over 20 years. The manager, a soft-spoken woman named Denise, greeted me by name. She didn't know anything, of course. Just smiled politely and led me into the back vault. My hand trembled as I turned the key. Inside was a stack of folders, just as I remembered. Tax records, copies of our marriage license, Robert's military service documents, and at the bottom, a blue folder with one word written in his familiar script, "Private." I pulled it out and sat down at the small desk inside the vault room. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. The first page was a handwritten will. Not typed, handwritten, in blue ink, dated just 6 months ago. Robert's writing, his signature, and 2 names signed below as witnesses, people I recognized from our church. I read each line slowly, careful not to miss a word. It was all there. The house, the bank accounts, the savings bonds. Every asset. And it named me as the primary trustee. Not Allison. At the very bottom, beneath his signature, Robert had written a note. Just a single line, but it hit me like a prayer. "Don't let them pressure you, Dulcie. You know what's right." My breath caught in my throat. I pressed the page to my chest and sat there for a long time, letting the silence of the vault settle around me like armor. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't alone. I gathered the documents, slid them carefully back into the folder, and tucked it into my purse like a treasure. No, like a shield. When I stepped out into the sunlight, it felt like stepping into a different world. Not the one where I had been cast aside, but the one where I had just found a voice again. Robert had trusted me to fight. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't planning to run into her. It happened in the grocery store parking lot, of all places. I had just stepped out, folder tucked safely inside my purse, mind spinning with next steps, lawyers, copies, court filings. And then I heard her voice. "All done shopping?" I turned, and there she was. Allison, leaning against her car like she had all the time in the world. I hadn't seen her since the morning she'd told me to leave. And seeing her now, so calm, so in control, it sent a chill up my spine. But I stood my ground. I could ask you the same, I said, my voice steady. Her eyes drifted down to my purse. That's when I realized the folder was sticking out just enough to be seen. A corner of blue, barely visible, but visible enough. She pushed off the car and walked toward me, too casual to be natural. "What's that?" she asked, tilting her head. I said nothing. My hand gripped the strap of my purse tighter. "Let me see it," she said. Her tone changed, no longer playful. I didn't move. "Allison," I said quietly, "not here." But it was too late. Her hand darted forward, and before I could stop her, she grabbed the folder and tried to pull it free. I held on. People were nearby. A man loading groceries. A teenager walking a cart back to the store. I didn't care. Let them watch. "Allison," I said again, firm this time. "Let go." She hesitated, her eyes locked on mine. Then she released her grip and took a step back, trying to save face. She smoothed her blouse and let out a laugh, cold, hollow. "You shouldn't get your hopes up, Mom," she said. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll just embarrass yourself." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what I hadn't wanted to see before. The entitlement. The calculation. The same girl I had once held during a divorce now looked at me like I was a burden standing in the way of her prize. "I'll take that risk," I said. "It's mine to take." She stepped closer again, lowering her voice. "If you challenge this, everything will come out. You don't want that, do you?" I didn't blink. "I want the truth," I said. "Whatever that brings." And I turned, walked to my car, and drove away with the folder still tucked safely against my side. She didn't follow, but I could feel her eyes burning into my back. And I knew, this wasn't over. Not even close. Mr. Leeds read the second will twice. He didn't say anything at first. Just ran his finger slowly along the signature, then tapped the edge of the paper with a kind of nervous respect, like he was handling something sacred. "This," he finally said, "this changes everything." I sat across from him, clutching my purse in my lap. The room was quiet, except for the low tick of a wall clock and the distant hum of traffic outside the office window. "You're sure it's valid?" I asked, though my voice sounded small, even to me. He looked up, steady and calm. "It's dated later than the one Allison submitted. It's in your husband's handwriting. And the two witnesses are reputable, one's a retired judge, the other a church elder. That's as solid as it gets." I nodded, my breath shaky. "And the note?" I asked. "The one he wrote at the bottom?" Mr. Leeds smiled faintly, almost with admiration. "Let me tell you something, not many people do that. A personal note like this? It speaks volumes. If anyone tries to argue coercion or confusion, this shows he was clear-headed. Intentional." I leaned back in the chair, suddenly overwhelmed. Relief, grief, anger, they all came flooding in at once. Mr. Leeds folded the will gently and slipped it into a protective sleeve. "We'll file to challenge the previous will. But be ready, Mrs. Wells. Family turns ugly when money's involved. I've seen it more times than I can count." "I've already seen the ugly," I said softly. I just didn't want to believe it. He paused, then nodded. "You're not the first widow to sit in that chair. But you might be the first who came this prepared." I gave a bitter little laugh. "I didn't come prepared. I came desperate. The rest? That was Robert." Mr. Leeds reached for a file and began preparing the paperwork. "I'll need copies of your ID, your marriage certificate, and anything else showing joint ownership or prior intent. Once we have everything, we'll file for an injunction." "Injunction?" I asked. "To pause the execution of the previous will, so Allison can't touch anything else." "Not legally." I nodded, a spark of steel rising inside me. She took my home, tried to erase my place in Robert's life, but now, the law was on my side. And so was time. I gathered my things, shook Mr. Leeds's hand, and stepped back out into the afternoon sun with my shoulders straighter than they'd been in weeks. This wasn't over. But it was beginning to turn. 2 weeks later, I stood at the courthouse filing counter with Mr. Leeds by my side. The clerk barely looked up as she stamped the injunction paperwork and slid it into a wire basket. Just another form in a long day. But to me, it felt like planting a flag in the ground. I wasn't invisible anymore. The court had accepted the challenge. Until a judge reviewed both wills, no one could touch the estate. Not the accounts. Not the house. Not the investments. Everything was frozen. Mr. Leeds turned to me with a satisfied nod. "We've drawn the line," he said. "Now we wait." I thought I would feel anxious. Nervous. But I didn't. I felt power. That same afternoon, Allison was served, during a brunch she was hosting at the house that should have been mine. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. The moment she got the papers, she called me. Her voice was pure venom through the phone. "Are you out of your mind?" she spat. "You're suing your own daughter?" I stayed quiet, letting her rage echo for a moment. Then, calm as ever, I replied, "I'm standing up for myself. This is ridiculous. I deserve this money. Dad left it to me for a reason. And now a judge will decide," I said. "Not you." She went silent for half a beat, then let out a bitter laugh. "You're going to embarrass yourself in court, Mother. You think anyone's going to take you seriously?" I didn't flinch. "They'll take the handwriting experts seriously. The witnesses. The documents. The law." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to imagine her face, pale, furious, trying to find a way to spin this. Finally, she snapped, "You're insane. You're going to die alone." "No," I said quietly. "I've been alone. What I won't be is controlled." I hung up. No more explanations. No more pleading. The legal process was underway, and for the first time since Robert passed, the weight pressing on my chest had shifted. The house was still hers for now. But she couldn't sell it. Couldn't mortgage it. Couldn't so much as change the curtains without violating the injunction. I had my foot back in the door. Maybe not physically. Not yet. But in every way that mattered, I was home again. That night, I sat alone in the motel room again, but it didn't feel like the same place. The curtains were still thin, the mattress still stiff, but something had shifted inside me. On the table beside me sat a neat stack of papers, the court injunction, the new will, and Robert's handwritten note. I read that line again, "Don't let them pressure you." It was like he was still here, reaching across time, giving me the strength I hadn't known I needed. I used to believe betrayal happened in a moment. A decision. A flash of cruelty. But I see it now. This wasn't sudden. Allison didn't turn cold overnight. She rehearsed this. The long talks where she asked about Robert's finances. The times she volunteered to handle his documents when he got tired. The sudden interest in estate planning, in property deeds, in joint accounts, always under the guise of helping Dad with his paperwork. Even the way she slowly isolated me. "Mom, you don't need to go to his doctor appointments, it's too stressful." "Mom, I already talked to the lawyer, don't worry about the details." I thought she was being considerate. She was clearing the path. And me? I stood there smiling, handing her the keys. I let her wrap her arms around me while she stole the ground from under my feet. Now I knew why Robert never showed me that last will. He must have suspected what she was capable of. He was protecting me the only way he could, with a paper trail and a whisper, "Don't let them win." I stared at my reflection in the dark motel window. Same tired eyes. Same lines carved deep from years of worry and sacrifice. But there was something else in that reflection now. Steel. I picked up the phone and made a list of everyone who needed a copy of that will. My lawyer, the court clerk, Robert's old law partner, anyone who could become a witness to the truth. Allison had underestimated me. She thought she'd left me weak, grieving, beaten. But she forgot something. I've spent a lifetime holding families together with duct tape and faith. She's about to learn what a woman like me can do when she finally stops sacrificing and starts fighting. The next morning, I walked into the copy center like a woman on a mission. No makeup, no smile, just a folder clutched to my chest and a list of names in my coat pocket. The man behind the counter greeted me with a chipper, "How can I help you today?" I didn't waste time. "I need certified copies, high resolution, black and white and color, of everything in this folder." He blinked but nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I stood there as the machine came to life, spitting out page after page, the handwritten will, the notarized witness signatures, Robert's note, everything. I watched each sheet as if guarding treasure. Because that's exactly what it was. Allison thought she could control the narrative, silence the evidence. But I wasn't leaving a single piece for her to erase. I had learned, finally, you don't keep truth in one place when you're fighting someone who lies with a smile. I mailed a copy to Mr. Leeds. I mailed another to the county probate court. A third to Robert's former law partner, Mr. Whitmore, a sharp, respected man who once told me I was the only reason Robert didn't show up to meetings in his pajamas. And one I mailed to myself, certified, sealed, signed, because if there's anything I've learned in my 69 years, it's this: paper talks. And when people try to twist the truth needs backups. I even typed a timeline of everything: when Robert updated the safe deposit box, the date Allison presented her will, the moment I retrieved the real one. I attached receipts, postmarks, bank logs, everything. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed a binder. That afternoon, I bought one. A simple black binder with plastic sleeves. I placed every page in order, labeled each section, and placed a sticky note on the first page that read, "For the judge. From the wife." And when it was done, I sat back and took a deep breath. The motel room was still small, the lamp still flickered, but the air felt different. I was no longer just surviving. I was documenting, preparing, defending myself the way no one else ever had. Some people fight with fists. I fight with folders. And this folder was going to court. The preliminary hearing was held in a modest courtroom, nothing like the grand halls you see on television. Fluorescent lights buzzed above us, and the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone, sat behind the bench with a quiet authority that demanded respect. I sat beside Mr. Leeds, my hands folded on top of the black binder. Across the aisle sat Allison, in a tailored navy suit that didn't soften the tightness in her jaw. Her lawyer, a younger man with slicked back hair and an overconfident smirk, seemed more annoyed than concerned. He hadn't seen the second will yet. The judge began with the basics, confirming dates, parties, relationships. Then Mr. Leeds calmly stood and presented the new will. "Your Honor," he said, "this handwritten document was found in a joint safe deposit box belonging to the decedent and my client. It is dated 6 months after the will presented by the opposing party and includes 2 credible witnesses. We request this be recognized as the most recent valid testament." He handed the folder to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. She read it quietly, page by page. Then she looked up. "This signature," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. "It's consistent with the handwriting sample on file." Then she turned to Allison's lawyer. "Counselor, were you aware of a second will?" The lawyer looked blindsided. He flipped through his papers, completely lost. Allison didn't move. The judge turned her gaze to her. "Ms. Wells, did you know about this?" That's when Allison's mask cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. And then, in a voice too soft to be strategic, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to find it." The words hung in the air like a slap. I didn't gloat. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at her the way a mother sometimes has to, when the lesson comes too late. The judge straightened her shoulders. "We will reconvene with both documents under review. Until then, the injunction remains. No further distribution of assets will proceed." Allison's lawyer tried to recover, muttering about needing time to review, but it was too late. The courtroom had already shifted. So had the power. For the first time since Robert's funeral, I wasn't the one being questioned. She was. We walked out of the courtroom into the long marble hallway, her in heels that clicked like daggers, me in the same modest flats I'd worn to Robert's funeral. The silence between us stretched as we moved past the vending machines, the bulletin boards, the portraits of old judges. I didn't plan to say anything. But she stopped, right in front of a stained glass window that caught the morning light just right. "You've made this ugly, Mom," she said without turning. It didn't have to be like this. I looked at her back for a moment before answering. All this time, I said softly, you just wanted the money? She finally turned to face me. No tears, no apology, just that same expression I used to see when she was 5 and got caught hiding a broken vase behind the couch. Except now it wasn't a vase, it was my life. You had your life, she said, her voice clipped. It's my turn now. I nodded slowly, letting the words settle. There it was. The truth, clean and raw. She didn't want to share. She wanted to replace. I looked at her, not as my daughter, not as the little girl I once braided hair for or soothed through nightmares, but as a woman I didn't recognize. Well then, I said, you can have your turn in court. Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to beg. But I turned before she could speak. I didn't need another performance. I'd already seen the rehearsed version of her love. Now I was walking towards something real. A judge, a trial, and the paper trail she never thought I'd follow. As I reached the elevator, I felt the eyes of strangers on us, some curious, some sympathetic, some simply passing through. Let them look. Let them see what a mother looks like when she finally stops hoping for the child she raised, and starts protecting the woman she's become. The courtroom was fuller this time. There were cousins in the back row, ones who never called unless someone died. A neighbor from our old street. Even Carol came, sitting quietly with her hands folded in her lap like a silent guardian. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my binder open, my spine straight. Robert's words echoed in my mind, don't let them pressure you. Allison sat across from me, jaw tight, her lawyer now significantly less smug. The judge entered, and we all stood. Then the proceedings began. Mr. Leeds presented the ink analysis. A forensic expert had dated the blue ink on Robert's handwritten will. It matched the batch manufactured during the time he wrote it. Consistent with the timeline. Confirmed, not altered. Then came the witnesses. The retired judge took the stand and swore under oath that Robert was of sound mind and will when he signed the document. He said he wanted to make sure his wife was taken care of. That she'd never be put out of her own home. My throat clenched. Allison's lawyer scrambled to question credibility, to sow doubt, but it was like watching someone try to stop a dam with a teaspoon. Then the judge turned to Allison. Ms. Wells, she said, voice calm but piercing, when you filed the initial will, did you verify it was the most recent? Allison didn't answer right away. Her lawyer gave her a quick nudge. Yes, she said finally. The judge raised an eyebrow. Did you even read the original will, the one you just claimed was the final version? Allison hesitated. Then, parts of it. The judge didn't look impressed. Because had you read the last page carefully, you might have seen that your father referenced a review meeting, scheduled 2 months later. That suggests he was already planning a revision. The courtroom stilled. Allison opened her mouth, then closed it. No lies this time, no charm, just silence. I watched her sit there, pale as paper, trapped not by my accusation, but by her own arrogance. The judge turned back to the bench. The court recognizes the later will as valid. All prior claims are null. Distribution of the estate will proceed accordingly. That was it. No dramatic gasps. No screaming. Just justice, plain and steady, like a gavel hitting wood. As we stood to leave, I felt Carol's hand rest gently on my shoulder. And for the first time in months, my body didn't feel heavy. It felt grounded, seen, and finally, safe. 2 weeks later, I opened the front door to my home. Not a motel room, not a borrowed couch. Home. The keys felt different in my hand, heavier, somehow. Not because of the metal, but because of what they meant now. I hadn't just unlocked a door. I had reclaimed a life. The court's ruling was final. The later will stood. Allison had been ordered to return a large portion of the funds she had already transferred to her personal account, including a 5-digit withdrawal labeled home renovation. Except the only thing she had renovated was her wardrobe. She tried to spin it, of course. Told distant cousins that I had manipulated Robert. That I'd gone crazy. That grief had made me vindictive. But the paper trail said otherwise. And so did the judge. So she left town. No tearful goodbye. No apology. Just a hasty move to another state and a few bitter texts sent to relatives who hardly knew me. Let her have her version. I had the truth. The living room still smelled faintly of her perfume. I opened the windows. Let the wind clean out what the court couldn't. Slowly, I moved through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the places Robert and I had built a life one paycheck, one Sunday, one winter night at a time. In the bedroom, I found his old slippers tucked behind the dresser. Dusty, but still waiting. And on the nightstand, his reading glasses. I sat on the edge of the bed, held them to my chest, and let myself cry, not from loss, but from release. I had mourned Robert twice, once when he died, and once when I thought he'd left me unprotected. But now I knew better. He hadn't forgotten me. He had fought for me in the only way he still could. On paper, with faith, and I had answered that fight in kind. In the end, the estate was returned to me. The accounts were frozen, audited, and corrected. The lawyers said it could have gone either way, if I hadn't found that folder, if I hadn't kept pushing. But I did, because I remembered who I was. Not just a widow, not just a mother, a woman with her name on the deed. A woman who came home. Late one afternoon, I sat on the garden bench behind the house, the same one Robert built the summer he retired. The wood had weathered over the years, but it still held my weight like it always had. In front of me, the hydrangeas swayed gently in the breeze. I had planted them just days earlier, using the very bulbs Robert had ordered that last spring. They were his favorite, blue, soft, proud. Like him, the soil still clung under my nails, but I didn't mind. There was something deeply healing about digging into the earth, about reclaiming space not just legally, but physically. Every shovel of dirt felt like a stitch closing a wound. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just settles in. Quietly, soft as dusk. I had spent so many weeks preparing documents, giving testimony, defending my name. But here, in the stillness of my own backyard, I realized something even bigger. I had defended my dignity. No one could take that from me again. Allison hadn't called. She hadn't written. Not even a message to curse me out one last time. And strangely, that hurt less than I thought it would. I had already said goodbye to the daughter I raised. The girl who cried into my lap after her divorce, who whispered, "You're the only one I trust." That girl was long gone. What remained was a stranger wearing her face. And maybe someday, that stranger might feel something, regret, reflection, remorse. But I wasn't going to wait for it. That's not how healing works. You don't sit around hoping someone will pull you out of the water. You swim. You build your own shore. And you plant flowers. I reached over and touched one of the blooms. It was just starting to open, still small, still unsure. But it would grow. So would I lost a daughter to greed. But I found myself in truth. And truth, when rooted deep enough, doesn't wither. It blooms. About a month after the final ruling, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name in handwriting that wasn't Allison's. Inside was a cashier's check, made out to me, for the exact amount the court had ordered her to repay. No note, no apology, just the money. At first, I didn't know how to feel. Relieved? Insulted? Vindicated? I placed the check on the kitchen table and stared at it while the kettle boiled. It felt hollow. Not because the money didn't matter. It did. It would help me replace what was lost, refurnish the guest room, fix the plumbing in the downstairs bath, maybe even take that train trip Robert and I had always talked about. But what I realized, standing there in my quiet kitchen, was that I didn't need the check to feel whole. That came from somewhere else. From the quiet courage it took to say, "This isn't right." From the mornings I woke up scared but acted anyway. From the folder I built page by page, knowing it might be the only voice I had left. Justice isn't always about revenge. It's not a headline. It's not a family gathering where someone stands up and apologizes while violins play. Sometimes justice is just this. a widow, in her home, planting flowers where bitterness might have grown. A check with no name, sitting unopened on the counter while the kettle whistles in the background. The absence of fear, the return of breath. I cashed the check the next day, not because I needed closure, but because it was mine. And for once, no one could argue with that. Later that evening, I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and listened to the wind moving through the trees. No shouting, no lawyers, no lies, just the soft hum of a world that had kept spinning while I was busy saving myself. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, but it was justice, and it was enough. These days, I wake up early. Not because I have to, but because I can. I start the morning the way Robert used to, boiling water for tea, cracking the kitchen window just wide enough to let the air in. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's peaceful, familiar, like a friend who knows how to sit beside you without asking questions. I've started writing things down, memories, recipes, moments I don't want to lose. At first, it was just a way to fill time. But now it feels like I'm giving voice to everything I swallowed for so long. Because for years, I was quiet. Quiet about the disappointments. Quiet about the loneliness that crept in after retirement. Quiet about the ways I shrank to keep the peace. But after what happened with Allison, I realized something that changed everything. Silence is not the same as peace. I had spent decades smoothing over tension, holding in pain, telling myself, it's not worth the fight. But sometimes, the fight is the only way to hold on to yourself. Not with shouting, not with fists, with truth, with paper, with your name said out loud in a courtroom, and no one daring to deny its worth. I didn't just survive what Allison did. I outgrew the silence she counted on. And in doing so, I found something I never expected to reclaim at my age, my voice. Now, when I walk through the house, I don't tiptoe. I don't apologize to the walls for still being here. I open windows. I hum while I dust. I speak to Robert like he's still somewhere nearby, because honestly, some days, it feels like he is. The pain hasn't disappeared. It lingers like an ache in old bones. But I've learned to live beside it, not beneath it. Because I've been beneath too many things for too long. Now, I rise. Every day, a little taller. Every breath, a little fuller. Every word, finally mine. The anniversary of Robert's passing came quietly. No dramatic storm. No flickering lights. Just a morning sun that filtered through the curtains and laid itself gently across the kitchen floor. I set out his favorite mug. The one with the chipped handle and the words, "World's okayest golfer." It still made me smile. I poured myself tea, placed a single hydrangea in a jar on the table, and sat with him. Not with grief, but with memory. And this time, it didn't hurt. This time, it felt like home. I took the day slowly. Trimmed the roses in the front yard. Donated some old clothes. Baked the lemon cake he used to request every spring. No one called. No one needed to. Because I didn't need an audience to feel full. I had lived through betrayal. Been pushed out of my own story. And still, I came back. Not as the same woman. But as one who knew her worth, line by line, page by notarized page. That evening, I sat on the front porch as the sky turned gold. The same porch where Allison once told me to leave. Where I stood trembling, suitcase half-zipped, heart in pieces. But now my hands were steady. Now the porch was mine. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat, present, rooted, alive. I thought about all the women like me. Women who were told they were too much, or too old, or too late. Women who gave everything and then got blamed for asking for anything in return. To them, I say, don't knock. Don't wait to be let in. Walk back into your life like it never stopped being yours. Because here's the truth they don't tell you, survival is quiet. Healing is slow. But dignity? Dignity walks in on its own 2 feet and stays. And that's exactly what I've done. I walked back into my life. And I'm not leaving again.